It's fortunate for us. With the last few elections, we haven't had a lot of turnover. Um, and I think part of what's helped is we have a relatively intact team that's been working through our strategic planning process and our implementation processes for several years, to where it's starting to become really kind of, I call it hardwired into just the way we operate, right? And so as we have onboarded some new elected officials, they're already stepping into an organization that already has a system in place where, everybody gets together, we share ideas, we debate civilly and openly, we prioritize, we agree on what we can agree on, and then we set the things that we can't agree on aside and say, okay, these are the things we agree we can actually execute on in the next 12, 36 months. And so I think as we onboard new people, they step into a system and they realize, okay, this is kind of how things work here. And, they're certainly free to bring their ideas and the things that they want to accomplish, but they recognize early on that, this is an organizational strategy where everyone's input is reviewed and shared. And ultimately it boils down to, what can the elected body agree on, and what do we have the resources to actually accomplish, and we move forward. So I think those are some of the things, that have been helpful, is just creating the system, kind of the machine, if you will.
So how do you engage the departments in that conversation with the governing body?
So the department directors are there.
Okay.
I certainly invite their input. I spend time talking to the elected officials of the value of the people that run the day to day, the boots on the ground. These are the individuals with the expertise and the understanding of what our capabilities really are, financially and human resource wise and equipment wise. So I lean on the departments to really be there. And as elected officials start to talk about priorities and what they want to accomplish, it's good to have input from the directors to say, that's a great idea. However, right, I only have X number of people in that department. And in order to accomplish that, I'm going to need more resources. Is that something you're willing to give me? Otherwise, we may have to scale that back.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
so that we're creating actionable, projects and tasks that we know we have the resources to achieve.
Yeah. So I mean, you're really describing a pretty powerful culture, and conflict can either be like a really kind of productive process at arriving at better solutions, or it can be a destructive process. When we work with organizations, a lot of times we'll ask this question: how do you handle conflict?
Yeah.
So how what's your culture looking like from a conflict standpoint?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think having these strategy sessions, right?
Mhm.
It's a good opportunity. Um, I certainly promote utilizing a third party, but I've the more I've become comfortable facilitating and building the psychological safety, if you will, amongst my people. Good example, this retreat, I actually took the position of devil's advocate on everything the group threw up there, and I was asking for contrary opinions or ideas to try to break us out of this kind of groupthink, because our group is working well together. A lot of that, I was trying to generate conflict, generate debate, and oftentimes take that contrary position to go, I don't think this should occupy space in our plan right now. This is why, right? To help the group try to really debate and discuss. My whole goal this session, which was just a couple of weeks ago, was really challenging my group to narrow it down to the most important things. And
Yeah.
so I challenged, right, the importance of some of the things that were brought up to say, really, how critical is that, right?
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, I think when conflict arises naturally, as oftentimes it does, because we have lots of differing opinions in our groups, I think a facilitator or a manager who's able to facilitate that, to
Yeah.
welcome it, and to put it in front of everyone else, and to facilitate good debate and discussion in a very civil way, to kind of show the organization like we shouldn't be afraid of conflict, right? We should welcome it in a civil, organized fashion. And conflict can oftentimes, and most oftentimes does, lead to better outcomes, better decisions, because it challenges everybody's thinking and everyone's positions.
I know that you do a yearly community assessment um, to gather feedback from the community relative to how you're doing and so forth. Maybe just touch on how you use that information when that comes back to you.
Yeah, several months before our annual strategic planning retreat, we do a community survey. We've done it now for, I think this was our sixth or seventh year. And, we're just gathering stakeholder input on the various services we provide, the various departments. We're asking, how often are you interacting with certain departments? And then what was your experience in those interactions? Um, we've we've added some questions around some of our strategic, objectives around park improvements. So we're trying to move the needle on how our community rates their experience in our parks, because that's been quite a focus for the last several years. The council's been putting a lot of money into park improvements
Hmm.
and adding some new parks. So now that we've got several years of data, we're able to actually identify trends, and I think I think we have a pretty good handle on just how the work we're doing is perceived from our stakeholders. That data is super valuable, obviously, as we go into our strategic planning process.
So one of the things you've done a great job of is using the data, facilitating the planning process internally and so forth, and then you're using our our tracking system, our strategy management system, to kind of keep your arms around things.
Obviously, during the retreat, we revisit our mission and our vision. Where are we headed as an organization, and then from there, we identify what are our key, uh, what do we call them, like our areas of priority, our strategic priorities.
Mhm.
And those are identified here on this sheet. We've made some tweaks to these, but fiscal sustainability is still there, employees and infrastructure, economic development. We've got a housing element now that we've added. So we've defined as an organization that if we're gonna if we're gonna achieve our ultimate vision for our community and where we're headed, these are kind of the big bucket areas that we need to be focused on right now.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can click over to the plan. We spend time talking about each of these areas, and so we talk about, okay, when it comes to being more fiscally sustainable, uh, what are the projects, what are the initiatives we need to take on in the next 12 to 36 months. And so those are then worked on as a group. We have some agreement, we put them in the plan, and then I don't know if you go down certain levels here in your demo,
Yeah.
but then under each of those we expand down as we get done with the retreat. Then I work individually with the department directors to say, okay, finance, we need to improve our financial planning. What does that mean? Where can we find improvements? And then working with finance, we come up with certain tasks and subtasks that we agree will help us achieve that initiative of improving our financial planning. So really at the retreat level, we're at that project kind of level of what we want to improve, what we want to decrease, what we want to increase, right? So then most of the work then becomes mine and the department heads and our staff to build out those lower layers. And then once it's built out, then we bring this back to the elected officials for their review to say, hey, you've helped us come up with the vision, our priorities, and these initiatives. Staff has now built out what we think will be the tasks and subtasks to get us there. How does this feel? So the councils, really, I try to keep the governing body, at least in my organization, I try to keep them out of the weeds. Um, let staff decide, how we're going to take the hill, if you will. You as a governing body, just identify what hill you want us to take, kind of using a military analogy there. The council identifies what hills to take, and then staff, we work on, what it's going to take to take the hill. And that seems to work well. I know, depending on the size and complexities of different organizations, the elected body may be right down in the weeds, and this system would work for that as well, right? But that's how I've kind of worked on it and broken it down.
And the intent is to be very transparent about, again, the work to be done to achieve these higher level objectives within those categories that you've identified. And so when you're developing the work plans or the project plans, is that a one-on-one process, or you bring all the department kind of heads or key staff in to kind of do that simultaneously?
No, it's one-on-one. The way I do it is I first off, as you can see, you can assign within the city strategy tool. I'll go through and typically assign which department I think that particular project would fall under. It's pretty natural for the most part, but sometimes once in a while you come across one and you're like, I don't know, let's give it to department so and so or such and such. And then they can go in, and under their login, that particular department director can pull up just those things that have been assigned to that department.
Yeah.
And so then what I usually do is I will task them to start building out the rest of the plan. I don't even spend that time with them at that point. I just say, hey, finance, go and start building that out, and then let's meet. And so I'm giving them the ability to spend some time and working on that. And then it's a matter of me sitting down with finance, reviewing what they've come up with, providing my input, making some tweaks, also prioritizing, right? Within the plan, it's easy to drag and drop and make, if you want to do it top down as the priority, or utilizing the icons to prioritize thanks. You could show what's our focus, what's medium or what's low. That's a good way to have clarity around what the expectations are. Some departments have a lot of projects in the plan, so it's helpful that we're on the same page and saying, okay, right now, these are the top priorities, go work on those. Let's identify these others as moderate or even low priority now.
And you can even within the system, because there's a lot of information in the plan. Like I said, be able to create a focus amongst everything that's important, everything that's going on is useful for some of those meetings. You can designate your highest priority items that you just want to talk about, and then filter the plan so it only shows those things that they're on that agenda as well. So to share with us about, so again, the plan's developed, kind of everyone's on the same page in terms of how it's going to get done and so forth. How often do you check back with the departments on their progress, and how often does the council review the progress of these key initiatives and projects?
So I have biweekly meetings with each department director, and so it's just a natural time for me to say, great, let's pull up the strategy. Let's take a look at where you're at. What help do you need from me? What things are you working on? Are you on task? Are you on schedule? So it just becomes a real natural management tool. And then we can talk about any other items, right, the department head has, or what he or she needs from me. The elected officials also have a login. So at any time, right, they could drop in and take a look at the plan. It's a viewer only access. Honestly, I don't know that any of them do that because at least quarterly, if not more frequently, depending on the need, I will just simply export a copy of this to a PDF or Word or Excel, and then create a PDF and just put it in my council packet. And we'll just do an update during a work session. That's an opportunity for staff to seek some clarification from the elected officials on anything that might need some clarity. It's an opportunity to make any tweaks to the plan, give a reporting on where we're succeeding, where we're behind, and how all that looks. So yeah,
well, it's a great process, and the thing I'm hearing is that you're consistent with it. And I've seen situations where people put a lot of energy and money into developing a plan, and then they don't look at it. They don't manage by the plan itself. So their execution, their implementation really is impacted by that. But one of the things I'll also point out is we a lot of the organizations we work with do a lot of grant management as well, and so these, as you said, they're initiatives, they're projects, but we can also use the system to designate something as a grant, and then you have a whole level of grant detail that can be updated so that typically you have to have your finance, your grant management, um, the grant manager, and maybe a contracts office provide some oversight. And this just allows them to set up their reminder schedule for reporting, make sure the costs are outlined so that the grant itself is in compliance. It's kind of getting at the tactical level, but again, many organizations we work with are very grant driven, and the management of that grant, in alignment with their strategy, is a major component for how they're operating. So anyway, any other again, really a great example of a strategic organization. Again, how you do the planning, how you gather data, and then how you translate that data into an actionable plan, and then make it really a living, breathing process. I've always been very impressed with how you're operating. But any other concepts or any kind of feedback on the impact of this system on kind of the effectiveness of South Ogden City?
I just think the accountability of utilizing city strategy in this way, accountability, man, when my name is on there and I'm assigned as the owner of a particular project or initiative, and I know that the organization is going to be regularly reviewing this, looking for updates. We didn't point out the progress percentages over there, where it's a quick way to see, where are we on a particular project. And so, I mean, when you're talking about, because I agree, I think a lot of organizations that do strategic planning, most of them probably struggle with the implementation part.
Yeah.
Right? They may do a good job of identifying what they need to do, but how do we track it? How do we hold ourselves accountable? How do we keep it in front of us? Because we still have all the day-to-day stuff, right, that we have to process. That doesn't go away, unfortunately. And so I think what I've seen in value of utilizing this tool has been there's really no way to hide, right? I mean, we're holding ourselves accountable because we see this, and the community knows it. It's a communication tool, right? It's a prioritization tool. It's an accountability tool. And I've seen it used in all of those different ways, to where when my elected body comes under some heat, as oftentimes they can from the community about, you guys don't know what you're doing. Well, they've thrown this plan out to say, no, this is what we do. Here are our priorities. Here's how we hold ourselves accountable, right? So I think it's a critical piece to. I always joke with my group that since I've been here in the 13 years almost that I've been here now, anything significant that we've achieved as an organization, as I look back, at some point was an idea that someone brought up during our strategic planning retreat. It was a post-it on the wall that someone said, I think we should do this.
Yeah.
And ultimately it got prioritized, it landed in our plan, and we accomplished it.
Wow.
Right. And so that to me is the importance of having a tool like this and utilizing this kind of a process. Is now years later, we can look back and actually see the reason we've been able to execute on these things is because we prioritized it, we talked about it, that led into our budget where we funded it, and we actually achieved it, right? Otherwise, you just kind of left to the issue of the moment.
Yeah.
Right? What project does a certain council member want to do? And you're just kind of trying to keep all these balls in the air versus prioritizing, what are we going to do now? Everything else can wait, because here's our priorities. Let's go get those done. And then let's bring on additional ones as we start to check things off. So,
yeah. One thing I think, again, you really illustrated well is you need good tools. We think this is a good tool, but it's all about leadership. It's about the discipline of staying the course, getting the right people together, having the conversations. I really like how you've covered a lot of critical areas. And the thing about it is this can be replicated across any type of organization. Just good planning, good communication, good accountability. Again, the tools have a role, but it's no substitute for the type of leadership needed to ensure these things actually happen.